How North Korea has reacted to the UN Security Council's adoption of sanctions against Pyongyang, saying it will soon retaliate.
The adoption of sanction resolution against my country is an extreme manifestation of U.S. intention to eliminate at any cost the ideology, social system of DPRK and its people. The DPRK is ready to use any form of ultimate means. The forthcoming measures by DPRK will make the U.S. suffer the greatest pain it's never experienced in its history.
Han's comments came shortly after the Council unanimously adopted a U.S. proposed resolution over North Korea's sixth and most powerful nuclear test. And the new sanctions will target the country's textile industry and will cap crude oil exports to the nuclear-armed nation. The resolution was less tough than a previous version proposed by Washington, which would have blacklisted North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and the country's national airline. China has called for the full implementation of the sanctions while highlighting diplomacy as the only solution to the crisis.
China hopes that all parties will fully implement this UN Security Council resolution. I'll say it again, blindly piling on sanctions cannot resolve the root of the problem on the Korean Peninsula. Dialogue and consultation are the only way.
Japan and South Korea hailed the decision. Now Seoul says Pyongyang has no way but to end its nuclear program if it wants to escape isolation and economic hardship. North Korea was condemned globally for its latest nuclear tests on September the 3rd, which it said was an advanced hydrogen bomb. The U.S. and its allies have repeatedly urged the North to give up its nuclear and missile programs. However, Pyongyang says they are essential to counter U.S. threats and aggression. Well, turning to Ontario, joined by political commentator and analyst Mr. Jason Unruhe. Thank you so much for being with us. Do you think that these the latest measures, these sanctions, are going to make a difference this time around to Pyongyang?
I don't think they will, because the DPRK has been willing to survive much worse conditions than this. If the loss of its trade partner in the Soviet Union in the early 90s was not enough to collapse the country, then this measure isn't going to do that. If anything, it's just going to make them angrier. I think very much that the DPRK is going to retaliate against these sanctions, and I believe they will probably do so by making another missile test or possibly testing another hydrogen bomb. But the DPRK has lived with such sanctions for, since the end of the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
And these.
What do you make of it, Pyongyang? Sorry to interrupt you, but Pyongyang has said that they have no choice because of the United States' aggression. They have no choice but to continue with their nuclear program.
Oh, they absolutely have no choice. The threat of invasion has been hanging over their heads for decades. The U.S. constantly says that it doesn't want war in this country or that country like the DPRK, but then they just turn around and invade countries anyway. Well, we've learned the lesson from Iraq and Afghanistan, even Syria and Libya, that even if you do have weapons and turn them over, you're going to be invaded by the U.S. anyway. Well, the lesson here is to preserve your ability to defend yourself from a U.S. military invasion, because nothing will be gained from surrendering that and end up making yourself vulnerable.
Okay.
While might does not make right, it does make for a country's survival.
Thank you so much for being with us out of Ontario, Mr. Jason Unruhe, political commentator and analyst.